So, my work is focused in Africa, both wildlife and culture, mostly tribal-based. And since some of you might not be familiar with my work, what I have done is put together about a 3-minute slideshow of my work in Africa over the last decade. May 24th is my 10-year anniversary in Africa. So with that, I'll go ahead and start this. So it's kind of funny because I'm watching that, I'm a little emotional, I have to tell you. I mean, when you can sit here and look back on your dream and you've been able to make it happen, it's quite powerful. So I say, what a decade, what a ride. This is my month of my 10-year anniversary of literally by accidentally picking up a camera. So how did this all start? More than a photograph is an experience. I was going through a change in my life. It was not a good change at the time. And I had a friend of mine who told me, why don't you go do something you've always wanted to do? And I had always wanted to go to Africa. And so I was over at my mom's, and I went on the computer, and I looked up the Sierra Club. I did a lot of hiking with the Sierra Club, and it was actually my friend in the Sierra Club who had mentioned they do all these great trips around the world. And I went home and I pulled it up on the computer, and there was a trip to Africa. I pulled out my credit card and put it down right then and there. A spontaneous reaction. And so I got this list, and on the list of what to bring in clothing, it said a 300-millimeter lens. And I said, oh my God, of course I'm going to want to take pictures of the lions that are really good. So I walked down to my local camera store, and I said, I'm going on safari, and I need a 300-millimeter lens and a camera, and what is that? Can you show me? Show me what I need to have for this. And they said, well, what kind of cameras are you familiar with? And I said, well, what kind you got? And he says, well, you probably have Olympus, Nikon, it's deer in the headlights. I had a disposable camera that worked great, right? You went down, you paid $10, you took the pictures, you sent it to them, and they sent the pictures back. And so it was at that point that I bought a 300 millimeter lens, 10D by Canon. It was a good thing digital had just come on the market. 3 years earlier, I would have bought all film equipment. It was a CD burner back then. We put our cards in the CD burners. And I asked the guy behind the counter, can I hire you to show me how to use it? And so I did. And off to Africa I went. And there's still kind of no words for my first shot of lions in Africa. But it was probably one of the most exciting moments of my life. So this is 10 years later. This was last year in the Masai Mara. This was my first photograph I took of a tribal person, and I thought it was fabulous. It was going to be a National Geographic. I mean, it's shot in the middle of the day. It's a quick snapshot. This was shot last year. So this is the type of work I'm doing today. And so I say never. Never tell yourself never, because you're the only one telling yourself that story. And then your competitors are going, yes, good, more room for me. It's all possible. So I dropped into Africa, and from the moment my feet hit that rich red soil, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the safari vehicles, the people, everything, I embraced all of it. I absolutely fell in love with it. I went back 3 times in 6 months, and actually it was on my first trip in Memorial Weekend 10 years ago. I sat in the middle of the migration, and I said, I'm going to become a wildlife photographer, like next year, because it's so easy. I'm just going to change careers. I should back up and say I was in the fashion industry, very, very successful in the fashion industry for 20 years, so I was used to a really nice lifestyle, and I thought, oh, I was successful here, I'll make this real easy. So because I was so passionate about the photography, I decided I really needed to explore this passion. And so I went to different places. I went to India, and I went to India because they had culture and wildlife. I seemed to be attracted to both. I went down to Panama. I couldn't make a decision of where I really wanted to focus. I went down to Brazil to photograph the jaguars, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to go photograph all the cats in the world, and all these crazy ideas, but every year I went back to Africa, and I really, really wanted to photograph Africa. But why didn't I? Why was I chasing around all these other than it was a first passion? And then I immediately started getting into stock agencies and trying to do editorial, and I had somebody that I highly respected, and in the business for a long time, tell me there's no market for images in Africa. And it's one person's words can hold the power to steal your dream. Words are so powerful, we all know that. And that played on me. It created fear and uncertainty, and I said, you're right, nobody needs a photograph of a lion. And what I didn't think about is the fact that this gentleman had made all his income basically off stock photography in the booming days. And so, no, probably for a male lion or a cheetah, there wasn't. So I had to come up with ways that helped me break through this. And I started following a lot of photographers. David Duchemin was one. Fear never drives us forward the same way it holds you back. I mean, that's a true and very powerful statement. So I decided I had to create a fear that was more powerful than the subconscious was telling me, that I couldn't do these things and that I couldn't focus my work in Africa and there was no market there. So one of the things that became very powerful for me is realizing that at the time, some of the other transition was going on in my life about 4 years later. My grandmother had fallen and broken her hip, and I went and visited her in the nursing home. I knew she'd probably spend the rest of her days there, and she's still alive with us, 100 this year, which is remarkable. But I looked down at her, and I thought, oh, my God, what happens if I get to that place in my life and I never live my dream? I had to go back and realize it's a one-way ticket. I get one shot at this, and I never had the courage. And so that fear has always become stronger than anything out there. When I start feeling like I'm not going to get another job, or I'm not going to sell another image, or I'm not going to have people come with me on safari. And so I created a fear that I'm coming to the end of my life and realizing that 20 years spending, I spent 20 years dreaming of my dream and never went for it. So I was still in the fashion industry, and I began seeing these amazing images. These are my photographs, but people, because I was in the fashion industry and they knew I loved Africa, started sending me these incredible images of tribes down in Ethiopia, the tribes of the Omo. This is where I've really kind of focused a lot of my work. And they really compelled me to do a lot of research and want to go into that area. And so I had to decide, do I have the courage to walk away from a very secure life and a big career and a very comfortable career? If I wanted a $200,000 to $412,000 Canon lens, I could go out and buy one. I don't have one today, not yet. And if I was going to leave that, and in the middle of the recession, I'd actually lost one really, really big job that I had had for 14 years, and I decided this was the time to go and do this. And I actually did get another job, and this was in 2009. And I was in that job, and I came up with a plan, and then I had an opportunity to go to Africa, and I walked out of it in the middle of the recession when people would probably have begged for any job. So it was a very scary time to do that. I went into Africa. I moved to Africa. I was with an organization, and from the moment I got there, I knew it wasn't going to work out. That was really, really devastating. So within 6 weeks, I came back and had to go back and take freelance work and come up with another plan because I wasn't ready to fail. You only fail when you quit. Find another way to have your drive and your passion take over. So I had already had 2 weeks planned for the Omo Valley when I came back, which was going to be done at the end of my 6 months in Africa with this organization. And I dropped into the Omo Valley, and it was magic. I felt like I'd gone back 1,000 years. These people were incredible. They were living in their traditions. They were living off the lands. And right at that point, I said, with all my being, this is the work that I believe that I'm here to do. And so I should back up a little bit and say that in between losing the job and I had the other job, I sold everything I owned in midlife to jump out and do this. So when I did fail, it was really quite devastating. So when I got into the Omo, I realized that this is where life has taken me. All the choices got me right here, and I need to have the courage to continue. And so we went really deep into the Omo River territory, and you're already off the really beaten path there, and I decided, let's go as deep as we can. I want to go to tribes where they've hardly had any visitors. And so we went in to find the Mosi tribe, which are known as the bad boys of the Omo, with guns and everything else. And we pull into this one village, and we were just going to camp there. We had camping, cook, and everything. And I go in and I ask the chief, can we stay in your village for 3 days? And I really immersed myself into these cultures, because you can't go just, so many times as photographers, we have a couple weeks. So we go and we rush into a place and we put up our camera and we start shooting. And what are we shooting? I really feel that I'm not really a photographer, but I'm a storyteller. The stories that fascinate me, both culturally and wildlife, and there's so much to be fascinated by, especially today with all the changes happening so quickly, really drive my passion for the photography and sharing those stories. So this really beautiful girl came out, and I really wanted to stay in this village. And then I noticed a little creek down by, just off where the village was. And so I said, let's go down there and let's photograph in the afternoon. So I spent all afternoon with them and then asked, can we go down and photograph maybe down by the river? And so we went down by the river. It was very, 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 very hot on that day. I'm a big, huge water drinker. I drink a lot of water. I've been in Africa probably 5 or 6 years now at this point, but I felt the dehydration coming on, and I knew I was going to faint. And I looked over at my God, and I said, I need to get out of the river right now. And there was an old broken down bridge that had come down. And so there was like this funnel and a little waterfall. And what does that create? A real hole where the water's going down. And I stepped back, Boom, I went into the river. This is the first time ever photographing this tribe. I fall in the river with my camera and my flashes, and my guide goes running in after me. Boom, he's in the river. The cook comes running in after him. Boom, he's in the river. And with 3 minutes, we've taken out a camera, a flash, and 3 cell phones. We're there 10 minutes. Meantime, now I didn't get the photograph of them laughing, but the whole tribe was sitting up on this broken down bridge, and they're laughing in hysterics. Now they've broken out in laughter. And what happened there? I became vulnerable. I became a real person. I didn't become this person that was just there to take some things with them and not become intimate. And that human connection created such an amazing bond. And the next 3 days were probably the best 3 days I've ever had in Africa with any tribe. That night, I laid down with the chief, and we sat around the fire talking. And, I asked, do you have a chicken in the village? And 4 translations later and a half an hour later, I have no idea. So the next morning, this was an incredible moment. The next morning, I get up and I look out my tent, and here are these warriors. And they're just sitting around my tent protecting the village. And it was such a surreal moment that I was just in this place all by myself with these incredible people that not many people know about. And I crawled out of my tent with my camera and my headlamp, because that's all I had. And so it might be hard to see with these lights, but you can actually see light on the AK-47. And I used my headlamp. So you use what you got. That's another thing. As a photographer, I work in very desolate places, and everything goes wrong all the time. So, of course, now I travel with 2 flashes. I always have 2 bodies, 3 if I can. I have 3 backup drives. But I've had to do some extreme things to make stuff work, and if I have had to pull out my iPhone and use it, I'll use it. So I spent the next couple years really getting to know the people down there. They're really beautiful. There's a lot of change that's happening. And this is roasting the meat at a ceremony, and they slaughter all the goats, and it's delicious. When they do the bull, this is the Hammer tribe, and when they do the bull jumping, this is one of the youngest bull jumpers I've ever seen. It's very rare, and it's a rite of passage. And when they do this bull jumping, they have these big, huge parties, and so it's a huge, roasting the goats, and it's quite an ordeal, dancing and whipping. And so I really got to know these people. I'm doing a 5-year project that looks like it's going to be 6 or 7 down there now. And every time I go back, I see devastation. And the first tribe that I showed you, the Mosi tribe, this was their village. This is where I stayed. If you go back today, the trees and the land has completely taken over. You'd never know there was a village there, and you would never know the river was there where I photographed the 2 girls. They're building a dam, the world's largest dam, the Gilby Dam, in this area. And the water of the river is getting lower and lower. They're getting ready to fill it. They're leasing all the lands out to foreign investment, farmers, Turkish, Malaysia, all of them. So every time I go down, I see the roads coming in. And this last time, I'm really good friends with the Kara. Lolly Labuka is one of my really good friends, where there's a ceremony that's going to happen in a couple weeks. I might be just hopping on a plane real quick here. And the land in between the Kara villages is being cleared. So, you see the cows here, and the trees are all ripped out in the background, and he's looking across the land that used to be, filled with grazing and for the livestock, and he's sitting on a pile of ashes where they've burned all the trees. And they've cleared the land, and they're putting in cotton. And the land has been completely cleared, like probably 10 miles in between each village. So I'm sure when the dam goes in, they will probably remove them completely from their land. So I'm hoping that won't happen. We won't know until that happens. You can see here the difference of the clearing in the land, and the livestock in the background has nowhere to go. And why I show you those, because this talk is not on what's going on in the Omo, but it's about that fear. And had I not had the courage and the faith and the passion to walk out of a very comfortable life, then I wouldn't have experienced any of that. And so much has changed. I came in right before the cell towers. And so when I think like, oh, I could have played it safe, and when I sold my house, I could have reinvested it at the bottom of the market, and I could have had this, and I could have had that, then there you have that what-if game. You got to play that what-if game fairly, and so that's what I do with myself. Okay, so what if? So what if now I have all this property, and now I feel really secure, and now I can go back to the Omo, and it's 5 years later. I have to give up all those experiences I've ever had. I have to give up the experience that made me really focus my work in the one part of the world that was really, really important to me. And so I say, fear weighs in ounces, and regret weighs in tons. You don't want to get to the end of your life and not have the courage to go for your dreams. You can make them happen. So I'm self-taught 100% from the 3 lessons I got at the photo store to go to Africa. And I did one workshop, and I was just really driven by all the stories. And so, I've been photographing now 10 years, and I'd like to think the first 5 years were, I do have a lot of photographs I use from the first 5 years, but not so much, because what really elevated me as a photographer, there's 2 things that are really important. The first one we're going to talk about is the power of light is the power in your photographs. And as you learn to see the light, it can be very empowering in how the viewer views your subject and how you portray them. My first, let me back up, like in 2005, when I went to Africa for the 4th time, I went out and I bought the 1D Mark II. That's dating it, right? And my 500, and it's the first time I went with photographers. I went with wildlife photographers. I said, oh my God, they're going to show me how to use this, so I'm going to be my wildlife photographer, right? And I get out there, and I wasn't shy. I did jump in the car, and they all had all these big lenses, and I'm sure they knew everything about them. And I said, I don't know anything, so if I do anything really ridiculous, it's okay, you can tell me, And so I can remember being in Samburu, and I'm with this really prestigious wildlife fellow, and he goes, I can't believe how fast the light goes flat. What do you mean the light goes flat? You can't see it out there? No, what are you talking about? And so it's all this dry grass in Africa. Well, it goes from golden to white really fast. I know that now, but I can always remember squinting out there, just having not a clue as to what he was talking about. It was like 9 o'clock, the light's gone. What do you mean? There's plenty of light in the sky. So, I thought I'd be a wildlife photographer, and then I was so drawn to the cultures and the people. And that might also have a lot to do with my fashion background and my textile background and the beauty of that. And so I started following humanitarian photographers, and I started really studying commercial photographers and anything. I would see them doing these incredible lighting techniques. So where do you get that? Go to the fashion magazines. They're the forerunners. See what the Joel Grimes and these top commercial photographers were doing. I was the girl that was never even going to have a flash, and I started seeing this use of light, and I said, wow, how do I do that? So I had this passion. And I went and started studying them. This is, they're so beautiful. You can photograph in golden light, and there are times when the golden light's absolutely stunning. But I also like to photograph twilight, sunrise, before sunrise. And so I learned to use flash, and I learned to use fill flash, and then I use off-camera flash. Now I have radio triggers, and I have 2 flashes going off at the same time. And so this is taken after sunset right after sun goes down, and this would be silhouetted. This is what you would do. You'd expose for a silhouette, then you got to fill the light back in. And it became magic. I was like, oh my goodness. Then I started seeking out more challenging ways to use light. So, you're in this great place, and I might only be there 2 or 3 weeks sometimes at a time, and I need to maximize the time I'm there. So I'm photographing my environmental photography during the golden hours when the light's good. But a lot of my portraiture photography I can also do during the middle of the day. So in this photograph that was here, this was taken at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I put her in the hut. And then I got in with a 1.8, 50 1.8 lens, and I pre-focused manual, and then I had them drop a tarp down over the entrance, and there was a little tiny window, and I had one of my guys hold the reflector, and I usually have all the guys in the tribe work with me. They love it. And they held a reflector, and they put light in through a little keyhole, so you call it keyhole lighting. And I love to set up shots. There's a lot of talk about that, setting up shots. This is part of my creativity, is that I'm documenting the beauty of these tribes. So like in fashion photography and in commercial photography, I mean, you're the artist in that. You're the artist in creating that scene. And what ultimately made me the photographer that I am today. So this was taken with off-camera flash. This was taken just after sunset. You can have the perfect lighting, and if you don't capture the motion, you have nothing more than an empty snapshot. So that brings up the fact that a lot of times, one of the things that happens with a lot of photographers, some that come with me, and they see all these incredible images with lighting and the cameras, and everybody gets into this gear mode in tech, and if I go out and I get all these lights and I get the radio triggers and I get this, I'm going to be a great photographer. But if you have an empty photograph, it's soulless. So when I'm photographing people, getting to know them, bringing the emotion out, this was a Hammer cattle herder. He actually was that scary. He happened to be coming through the camp of the Kara, and I said, what is he doing here? They're never here. They're very, very abrupt. I mean, they would probably shoot at you. I've been shot at before, but not by them. I got him to pose for me, which I thought was remarkable. And I captured really, really great emotion in this photograph. But if it had just been no emotion in his face, it would have just been a technical image without soul. So I'm a big believer in going in and getting to know your subjects. So what does this have to do with wildlife? Well, this is what elevated me as a wildlife photographer, because now I had had all these really wow experiences with light, with cultures, with creating, with designing. I've always had a very creative background, so I do really enjoy all the setup of it. But then I would go in and I'd have the sun over my shoulder, photographing the lion with the beautiful mane. Okay, I've been doing this 6 years. I have all this now, but I wasn't satisfied anymore. Now I wanted that drama in my wildlife images. And so it pushed me that I had seen the light and seen how to really enhance images by using all different kinds of lighting techniques, and I really only use my flashes at twilight and sunset. Otherwise, I work a lot with reflectors. I still really enjoy natural light. And so I started looking for different lighting in my wildlife. Side lighting a lot. So I say, I want the light in my wingspan. I want the sun in my wingspan, not in my flight path. So when people take my workshops, they love that. I go, you flapping your wings? Where's that sun? And it creates a very dramatic images. So the zebras and the horses. So what I found is that I really don't know that I would have really expanded my wildlife photography with the dramatic lighting without having learned the lighting by following people who do portraiture work and commercial work. And there wasn't a lot of workshops that focus on this as wildlife photographers or nature photographers on lighting. So I started teaching what's called Spirit and Light. I got really lucky. I found a ranch here in Southern California. And we focus on completely, instead of just running cowboys and horses, it's all about really getting photographers to see this really dramatic lighting. I mean, in a stream of images, this one's going to stand out. People will stop and look at. So then again, how does this apply? We go in and we learn these lighting techniques and the rim lighting and how to really make your images have impact in a world right now where we just have a sea of imagery. You know, how do you put yourself above and out there? Well, after we learn the skill here, then we go back into the wild, and I'm looking for this side lighting and this rim lighting. And so that transition of light really excelled me as a photographer. So be curious. Don't stay in the frame that I'm only a wildlife photographer and I don't shoot people. I have people that come on safari with me, really avid wildlife photographers, and generally I try to go by Mackay village, and it most times ends up being the highlights. Just really stay open to things that interest you. You never know where they're going to lead you. So really, again, just to emphasize that power of light, this was taken probably about 4 o'clock. The sun probably wasn't just where it should have been. And the sun was behind me. And we walked around to the other side of the pond 20 minutes later, and here the sun is off to the side here. It's dramatic difference in your photography. So you're in nature, you're a wildlife photography, go look up Sammy, see if they have a lighting class. Go sit in an afternoon, because you're really learning about light and shadows, even if they're setting it up. That will apply to what you're seeing. And then a little bit later, and we just have the rim lighting here on the horses. And then I'm like, okay, I got that one covered. So now what? So then I'm always looking for that drama, and we go into slowing down the shutter speed. And how does that apply? So what I'm getting at is it's always really good. You want to learn your skills here, learn your skills before you go photograph the stories you want to tell, and really work on your craft. I never have control of when the wildebeest are going to cross the river. I wish I did. I wish I had an on and off button, but I don't. And so they were crossing at this was probably about 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and I slowed down my shutter speed, and I did pan blur and had an interesting image. So just remember, go beyond with your images instead of just clicking the button. This always works. Tight water splash, we all see it every year. If you follow any of the BBC contests and outdoor photographer, the bear's always coming through the water, and it wins every year. But then what about slowing down your shutter speed and creating an artistic image? And these are the type of things that made my photography stand out. Backgrounds say everything. If you're going to have a background in your image, make it very important. Again, this was the middle of the day, and so I moved this gentleman into the hut, and then I had the problem of the light seeping through. So I quickly looked around, and I found a skin. I threw it up in the background, and look at the difference in the image. Okay, so it's the difference between a good image and a great image and an image that can be deleted. On this image, I had done everything right. I did not clip his feet. I have the whole shadow in, but the background was busy around him. I took one step back, and now the tree line comes straight into his head. The viewer, you come straight in. I find it's little tiny things. The two things you can develop your skills as a photographer is really learning to see light and learning to see your backgrounds. And is your story about the background, or is it about your subject? So here's Lolly, and we're sitting here along the river, and actually this is a nice photograph, but I really don't like when it's really about my subject. I don't want the horizon going through him. So I took a step lower, it got lower, and his head is now clear into the background, and here's the difference, creating what I think is a more powerful image. And it was like from this to this. Move around, get on the ground, get a different perspective. Watch what's happening in your backgrounds. Again, here, this is completely a portrait of my subject. The sky has nothing to do with it. So get rid of the sky, go in closer. And you make your subject right here very, very, very important. With wildlife, blur out the background, so open all the way up and get the longest focal length that you can get, fill your frame. Again here, this looks like a snapshot of an elephant, but I got up a little higher, I stood up on the top of the Jeep, and I took out the distraction. You get excited by your subjects, and at first you go, wow, look, it's a cheetah. And then a trained eye immediately goes and sees the color variation in the background, and it's distracting, it's going right through him. So this is a much stronger image. If you're photographing a portrait of a subject, make it only about that subject. This is funny. This reminds me of my first lion picture. It tells me that either my lens was too short or it was one of the first times photographing a lion, because the background has nothing to do with it. It's cluttery, it's ugly, it's exciting to you maybe, but not to the viewer. So again, keep it clean, going tight. If you want drama in your background, have a dramatic background. This was taken in Namibia last year, and the backgrounds there are just stunning. I had dreamed of this photograph. I had dreamed of the desert elephants are very, very rare. And we came out of the campground, or out of the lodge, and there was a campground I might stay at next year. I said, can we go by and visit that? And all of a sudden my guide says, look way over there. It was like an ant. And they came across this dramatic landscape, and just enough time to throw down the GoPros. Glad Borrow Lenses didn't see that one, because they lent me those. And then a big bull came behind it. I go out very remote, and I go very, very deep out into the wilderness so that I can have incredible moments like this. And this took about 7 days to get this photograph. So you see a lot of photographs, and you think, I went out there and just get that same photograph. We went back to the same ravine for 7 days. And one by one, she brought out her cubs. And pretty soon the pride went out to hunt, and all the moms put them together, and we rushed in and was able to experience this. There will never be a perfect time. You have to make time perfect. Damon John, Shark Tank. He's a great motivational speaker, if you ever get a chance to hear him speak. So that's pretty powerful. There will never be a perfect time to make time. Okay, if you get a chance, take it. If it changes your life, let it. Nobody said it would be easy. It's hard every day still for me. But I never want to give this up. They just promised it would be worth it. Take a calculated risk, but take it. The first step in taking a big risk is to accept the reality that getting to success will take a series of setbacks and failed attempts. It was very hard for me when I failed, when I moved to Kenya and had to come back while the whole world was watching and say it didn't work out. I'm getting ready to do that again in 2 months. I will be moving to Nairobi, and I am very nervous about the whole thing when I look around and packing up my life again. So I'm very excited, and then at the same time, there is still that fear, but you work through it because the passion and drive for what I want to do and the stories I want to tell. Don't take photographs to be this is the best advice I can give you. Don't take photographs to be the best photographer. Take them because you're driven to capture what you find fascinating and extraordinary. And what makes me feel confident in my photography is I'm so passionate about what I'm photographing. That how could you possibly capture something that you couldn't possibly have as much passion about that I do? I look at all these wildlife, Jennifer Wu's presentation was fabulous. I love looking at landscape, but I don't want to go out and take them. I don't have the passion they do, okay? So, and that will come across in your images. If you're passionate about something, you can make it. I've seen Art Morrison did birds. So I'm going to be the best bird photographer, be the best flower photographer, be the best wedding photographer, be the best because you're more passionate about it than anybody else. Let the work inspire you to go beyond what you believe you are capable of. So I've been fighting video. I know it's important. I've been shooting it. And it's about putting yourself out there in front of people. And so I'm going to do that right now. I just did my first multimedia piece. My shooting speed was off, but it was incredible. I went up to North Ethiopia for Lalibela for a ceremony. And had I not shot video, I could not tell the power of this story. It was just beyond, and I'm so excited now about video and multimedia as a way of telling stories. Again, because I feel like I'm a storyteller. The camera is my tool. Some people write stories. I feel more that I'm a storyteller than I am a photographer, because it's the stories that lead me to produce this type work. So it's my first multimedia piece. Thanks. Next, I'll add vocals, one step at a time, but start. So being a professional photographer doesn't mean you take better photographs. And some of you that are pursuing this know this a lot. It means you know how to run a business. So I just want to let you guys know, because you're here in Orange County, that at the end of June, I am going to be doing a Wisdom and Wine workshop. And it's a 4-hour workshop really discussing the business steps to how to start your photography business. And it's all based on my experience of scrapping along the way and how I did it. And I'll be talking a lot about that and going over the important first steps, finding a focus in your photography, branding, why it's important, strategies, insurance, you know, all those business things. If you're serious about it, this is stuff you really need to learn. And I really would wish somebody had a class like this for me. It could have greatly helped my suffering. I have an ebook on my website, Dream Plan Go, if you go to my website. And it talks about how to get a guide and travel in remote regions and when to go on alone. And so it could be a really great resource for you. And now we're going to do the Guru Gear giveaway in like 2 minutes. Do we have the little things that went around, everybody? Did anybody get a chance? The other thing I want to tell you, I have a table out in the exhibit area. I'm also giving away, I'm going to be giving away in 2 weeks, one of the Guru gear bags. So if you want to stop by the table and pick up a flyer on how you can register for that, I have information on the business class that I'm going to be doing in the afternoon. And it is called Wisdom and Wine because after we do a lot of left brain, we're going to need a little right brain and have some wine, and we'll get to network and enjoy that. Oh, one last thing. Anybody want to go on safari? I had a last-minute cancellation on my migration safari, and I'm offering the place to somebody willing to share for $2,000 off. So it's a last-minute thing, so while you're here, it just came up. I guess, I don't think we have time for questions. Did everybody get to fill out for the giveaway? Or August 17th through the 27th for the migration in Kenya. Yeah, so I have one spot, either men or women, whichever, willing to share. So it's a great opportunity because prices in Kenya are going up 16% next year. Yeah, they just put in a VAT tax, so if you're going to Kenya next year, you're paying a lot more. Okay, is there anybody to gather the... Does anybody have any quick questions, maybe right here, quick?
Yeah, I got a question. On your equipment?
Yes.
Because you need to be able to charge it. How do you charge your batteries and all the gear that...
If I'm going really remote, I bring a generator. I have a generator. I always travel. It's a great travel tip. I always travel with a travel bar. Also, that's in the plug the country I'm in. So I have those now, but if I'm going into Namibia for the first time, the first thing I want to do is I want to have enough time to go to a store and buy a power strip. I usually have my guides get them before. So you have multiple things to charge up, and I usually get 2 of them because I've had one go out in the field. Anything else?
Yeah, how do you match your flash when you have the sun setting and the warm light? How do you match that with the plug? Are you using a gel
Yeah, and a lot of these I'm not. I use them occasionally. And this talk, okay, so really, really quickly, that brings up a good thing about how I'm matching. But I do carry gels. Yeah, I plop them on there. But shoot your vision. I don't shoot with modifiers. I like a hard light. It's become my look. It's what I like. And I see these beautiful things with soft light, and I go and I put a modifier on there, and I'm putting my flash through, and I'm working, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm looking in the back camera. I don't like it. Take that thing off there. I've tried to work with modifiers several times. It's just not what gets me, And we were talking about this earlier, and this is something else. When you put yourself out there, remember, some people like rock and roll, some people like country, some people like rap, some people drive Jeeps, some people drive Hondas, some people drive Accords. If 50% of the people like what you're doing, that's awesome, Remember, we're all uniquely different. We like things differently. It's not your work. So shoot your passion.